G'day. Today we will discuss the case of Leslie Louise Van Houten and what we can learn from it. How does a teenager from a relatively stable background become involved in one of the most infamous murder cases in American history? Just a disclaimer. All commentary, theories and analysis presented in this video are for informational and entertainment purposes only. Opinions shared are speculative and are not intended to accuse, harm, defame or misrepresent any person, group or organisation. Background of the case. Leslie Louise Van Houten was born on August 23, 1949, in Altadena, California. By most accounts, her early childhood appeared relatively ordinary. She grew up in a middle-class household and was described as intelligent and socially capable. She had siblings, including adopted siblings, and for a time her life seemed conventional. But, as with many cases, the outward picture did not necessarily reflect inner stability. When Leslie was around 14 years old, her parents divorced. Family separation can affect children in many different ways, and later accounts suggest that this period was emotionally significant for her. During adolescence, Leslie became involved in the youth counterculture of the 1960s. California at that time was a centre of experimentation, anti-establishment values, communal living and widespread drug use. For some, it represented freedom. For others, it created an environment where vulnerable young people could be manipulated. By her mid-teens, Leslie had reportedly begun using LSD and other substances. She also experienced a pregnancy as a teenager, followed by an abortion that she later described as traumatic. Accounts vary regarding family pressure and emotional aftermath, but by her own telling, she felt anger, confusion, and alienation after this event. At this stage, Leslie appears to have been searching for identity, belonging, and meaning. This is important because people in that position can be more susceptible to charismatic or controlling individuals who promise certainty and acceptance. Eventually, Leslie moved into communal living arrangements in California. Through these connections, she met people associated with Charles Manson. Soon afterward, she joined the group that would later become known as the Manson Family. Life with Charles Manson. The Manson family operated less like a family and more like a coercive group centered entirely around Charles Manson. Members lived communally, often at Spahn Ranch, a former movie ranch outside Los Angeles. Manson exerted extraordinary control over followers. Former members described sleep deprivation, manipulation, humiliation, forced loyalty, sexual control, and heavy drug use. He frequently lectured followers about society, race war, spirituality, and his own importance. He presented himself as enlightened and anti-materialistic. In reality, he was a career criminal with a long history of manipulation. Leslie later described taking so much LSD during this period that reality itself became distorted. Whether taken literally or not, that statement suggests severe impairment and immersion in an unstable environment. This combination is notable: youth, identity confusion, drug use, social isolation from outside influences, and constant exposure to a controlling leader. Those ingredients can be extremely dangerous. Timeline of the crimes. Now moving to the crimes themselves. On the night of August 8th into August 9th, 1969, several Manson followers drove to the home at 10050 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles. Occupants included actress Sharon Tate, who was heavily pregnant, along with 4 others. The group murdered all 5 victims in a brutal attack. Leslie Van Houten was not present for these killings and was not convicted in connection with them. This distinction is often overlooked because the murders are commonly discussed together. The following night, August 9th into August 10th, Manson organised another trip. This time the target was the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Leslie Van Houten participated in this event. Several group members travelled to the residence. Accounts differ in some details, but it appears that Manson and Charles Tex Watson entered first and restrained the victims. After that, others entered the home, including Leslie Van Houten and Patricia Krenwinkel. Leno LaBianca was attacked in another area of the house. Rosemary LaBianca was taken into a bedroom. Evidence and testimony indicated that Leslie helped restrain Rosemary while another attacker stabbed her. Leslie later admitted to stabbing Rosemary as well. Reports differ on whether Rosemary was already dead at that point, but Leslie acknowledged participating in the violence. Either way, the legal and moral responsibility is severe. She was actively involved in a murder. The killers also wrote messages in blood at the scene, part of Manson's attempt to create fear and chaos. Arrests and trial. Eventually, investigators connected the murders to the Manson family. Members were arrested and charged. Leslie Van Houten was tried with Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. Tex Watson was tried separately. During the trial, Leslie's behaviour became one of the many shocking features of the proceedings. She at times appeared casual, smiling, or disconnected from the gravity of the crimes. She also initially minimised Manson's role and seemed loyal to him. This is one reason the public viewed her harshly. People often judge remorse not only by words but by demeanour. At that time, Leslie did not present as remorseful. She was convicted of murder in 1971 and sentenced to death. At the time, she was one of the youngest women sentenced to death in California. When California's death penalty laws changed, her sentence was converted to life imprisonment, retrials and prison years. Leslie later received a retrial because of issues related to legal representation. One retrial ended in a hung jury. She was eventually convicted again and sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. Over time, her presentation changed dramatically. In prison, she pursued education, participated in programs, and repeatedly expressed remorse. Mental health professionals who evaluated her over the years often described her as low risk, psychologically stable, and no longer influenced by the ideology that once defined her. Parole boards repeatedly recommended her release later in life. However, California governors overturned several of those decisions, citing the brutality of the crimes and concerns about insight and accountability. This created a long-running debate. Was Leslie being judged for who she had become or for what she had done decades earlier? After more than 50 years in prison, Leslie Van Houten was ultimately released on parole in 2023. Analysis. Now moving to my analysis. I think Leslie Van Houten's case sits at the intersection of personal responsibility and coercive influence. Both can be true at the same time. She was not an innocent bystander. She participated in a murder. She made choices that had irreversible consequences. That fact cannot be erased by youth, drug use, or manipulation. At the same time, context matters when trying to understand behaviour. Leslie appears to have entered the Manson family during a vulnerable stage of life. She had emotional instability, substance abuse issues, identity confusion, and distance from conventional support systems. Charles Manson seems to have exploited precisely those vulnerabilities. This is consistent with how coercive leaders often operate. They target people who are searching for meaning, isolate them, break down prior beliefs, and replace those beliefs with dependency. Another factor is group psychology. Individuals in extreme groups often behave in ways they would never consider alone. Loyalty, fear, conformity, and the diffusion of responsibility can override conscience. Drug use may also have played a role. Chronic psychedelic use in a chaotic setting could worsen suggestibility, emotional instability, and detachment from reality. Still, these are contributing factors, not excuses. Many people experience trauma, use drugs, or join unhealthy groups without committing murder. Leslie crossed that line. Why her parole was so controversial? I think one reason parole remained so difficult is that Leslie became symbolically larger than herself. She was no longer seen only as Leslie Van Houten. She was seen as part of the Manson family. The Manson murders carry enormous cultural weight in the United States. They represented fear, chaos, and the dark side of the 1960s counterculture. Releasing any member of that group was politically and emotionally difficult. In effect, she may have been serving 2 sentences, one for murder and another for belonging to one of the most notorious criminal groups in modern history. Final thoughts. Should she have been released? Reasonable people disagree. Some believe certain crimes justify permanent imprisonment. Others believe a parole system should recognise decades of rehabilitation and low future risk. What seems clear is that Leslie Van Houten at age 70 plus was not the same person as Leslie Van Houten at 19. The harder question is whether change should outweigh history. That is ultimately what made this case so divisive. It forces society to answer one uncomfortable question. When someone commits something unforgivable, can they ever become something different? Those are my thoughts on the case of Leslie Van Houten. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and feel free to comment any case you'd like me to cover in the future. I hope you've found this breakdown informative. Thank you for your time, and I will see you again on the next one.